So today we're going to talk about quadratic forms. And so for the most part, this is going to be a review of everything that you've learned in sections 2 and 4 that we did, that we've done in the first semester. So a lot of this we already know, and we're just adding to it. And so the very first thing we're going to talk about are some vocab. So first thing is our y-intercept. So the y-intercept is a point where your graph crosses point where the graph, so I'm going to call it a function, where the function crosses the y-axis. And the way you're going to find it is if you're given standard form, so remember standard form looks like y equals ax squared, oops, I'm supposed to say plus bx plus c, the value at the very end, the c value, this is your y-intercept. And your y-intercept is always going to be written as a point. So it's going to be the point 0, and then whatever your c value is, so your c value. All right, and so when I look at that on a graph, you'll notice that your y-intercept is just a point where that curve, because that's a quadratic function, where that curve crosses the y-axis. So remember, this is your x and this is your y. So it's just that point where it crosses, and that's called your y-intercept. Your x-intercepts are, and I'm going to say the point or points, it can be 2, where the function or the graph, whatever you want to call it, where the function crosses the x-axis. And again, that could be 0, 1, or 2, which we've talked about with the discriminant. And so if we can't factor it, then it wouldn't have x-intercepts. It would be above or below. So when we look at that, again, what we're going to do is we're going to factor. And when we say factor, remember that's doing the box. So I'm just going to write box method as a reminder. So we factor it and then we solve. Okay, so we're going to solve for x. And that's going to be our x-intercepts. And when we write those down, those are going to be written as like a number, okay, whatever the x value is. So it's going to be a number and then 0. And you can have 1, 2, or none of those. So when I look at the picture, these are my x-intercepts. It's where it crosses the x-axis. So if I was going to look at this problem, this one would be I would have 1, 2. So this was the point 3, 0. And this right here would be the point -2, 0. And notice the zeros at the end, where if I was doing the y-intercept, that was over 0 and down 1, 2, 3. So as you look at that, that's how we're going to get there. And again, that was our x-intercepts, which is right here. All right. So then the direction of it opening. So the direction that it opens is based off the a value of your standard form. So the direction of opening is your parabola or parabola, however you want to say it. The graph will have a max or a min. If it's a max, then it opens down. If it's a min, it opens up. And what we mean by that is if you have like down, it's going to go down, and up is going to go up. Okay, it's always going to form a U shape. It's either going to face up or down. And the way we find it is if we're given standard form again, we're looking at the value in front. We're looking at this a value. And so that a value, if that's bigger than 0 or positive, then that means it's going to go up. If it's less than 0 or negative, then it goes down. Okay, so as I look at this graph, even though I don't have an equation, if I was to look at it, I know that a is going to be positive because my U shape faces up. And that's just the facing way. Okay, so direction of the opening is just based off that A value. Does it go up or down? Okay, and then we've talked about the vertex. And so the vertex is the starting point. And we talked about this when we were doing transformations at the very beginning of the year. So it's your starting point or your max or min point. Okay, so it's like where it changes direction. So we could also write it that way. Point where graph changes direction. And in order to find the vertex, there's a couple different ways to do that. And one way is you can complete the square. So I'm going to just say this is option 1. Okay, well, let's write that a little bit better. So option 1 is complete the square. And I will show you that on one problem, but for the most part, that's up to you. I'll show you an easier way, and then you can choose which one. I'll show you both. Option 2 is you're going to solve for h, which is negative b over 2a, and then you're going to use that to solve for k, which you probably don't want to know what that means. But vertex form looks like this. Y is equal to a times x minus h squared plus k. And the vertex is the hk value. And so we have worked with this in completing the square, at least for honors. Regular, we skipped it because we ran out of time. But the option 2 is probably your easiest anyway. And so I'm just going to recommend option 2. Here, I would say option 2 is your best way, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Personally, I think it's the easiest. So, and then the axis of symmetry is an imaginary line. Imaginary vertical line. So that means up and down, going through the vertex. And the way we find that is it's just going to be the h value of your vertex. So x equals h. So as I look at all the pieces of that graph, notice that you have your vertex point down here. So this is my vertex point. That's your lowest point, or in this case, it's a min. Your point is going to be 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, negative 4. And then the axis of symmetry is that x equals 1. So in this case, our axis of symmetry is going to be x is equal to positive 1 because that's the line that runs up and down. So that's just your definitions of this section. Hopefully those are things that we already know. And then we're going to go through our 3 different forms. And so we've got a standard form, a factored form, and a vertex form. For honors, you should know all 3. For regular, you may not know the vertex form yet, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, so for standard form, remember that we've got our standard form ax squared plus bx plus c. If I'm given standard form, I know 2 things from it. I know that the very number at the end, so the number at the very end is our y-intercept. So in this case, it's the point 0, negative 5. And because of the value in front of x squared, or the a value, it's positive. So I know that it faces up. And if I was going to graph this, I'm going to draw myself a graph, and we're going to talk about graphing in just a minute. So we've got our graph, and we'll come back to that. If I have standard form, the next thing that I want to do is I want to factor. And so factoring is where we use the box. And so we're going to multiply a times c, which is negative 5. Our factors of negative 5 are 1 and 5. It's the only ones that we have. And what we're going to do then is we are going to figure out what sign do I need in order to get a positive 4. So to get a positive 4, I would need it to be a negative 1. And then we're just going to do the box and we're going to factor. So remember, the first term goes in the first box, the last term goes in the last box, and the pair that we picked goes in the other box. And we didn't have much to choose from. We only had one option. And now we're going to pull out our greatest common factor. So my greatest common factor of the first row is x. The greatest common factor of my second row is 5. Greatest common factor of my first column is x. Greatest common factor of my second column is negative 1. And we always like to do that check to make sure we're good. X times x is 1x squared. X times negative 1, negative 1x. 5 times x, 5x. 5 times negative 1, negative 5. So everything checks out. And so if everything checks out, then we just take our factors, which are found on the top and the bottom. So we're going to go x minus 1 equals 0. And x plus 5, the one on the side, equals 0. And then from there, we're just going to solve. And so I'm going to go add 1, so we get x equals 1. Subtract 5, we get x equals negative 5. And if I know those, then I know my x-intercepts. So that means it's going to cross at 1, 0, and it's going to cross at negative 5, 0. So that's where it crosses the x-axis. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do vertex form. And so vertex form is the one that's new. And that way we're going to solve it is new for everybody, regardless of whether you're in honors or regular. And so I'm going to show you completing the square as an option. Personally, I don't think that's the best option, but it's fine. So you're going to go x squared plus 4x plus, and you're trying to figure out what goes in that empty space. And then it's minus 5, and then minus what goes in the empty space. And remember, the reason I do plus and minus is because I want to make sure that if I add a number, I also subtract a number. So I'm not really changing the equation. It's like it's adding 0. And the way we're going to do that is we take the middle term, which happens to be 4. We divide it by 2, and then we square it. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 squared is 4. And so we're going to add 4 here and add 4 here. And then remember, we group that together and we rewrite it. So we're going to go y is equal to, group it together. So this is x squared. And then at the end, we've got minus 9 because negative 5 minus 4 is negative 9. And we have to determine what goes in that spot. Remember, what goes in there is this value here before you square it. So it's a positive 2, so we write plus 2. Now, when we look at that and compare it to vertex form, remember it's minus h normally. And so we do the opposite to get h, so it's plus 2. So the opposite of a positive 2 is a negative 2. And then your y-intercept is the number at the end. Okay? Now, that's one way to do it. This is called completing the square. Honors, you have seen this before. So this is called complete the square. Whoops. And again, this is option 1 that I probably wouldn't do. The other thing that they ask you to figure out is the axis of symmetry. I know that it doesn't say that on our paper, but you are going to need to know that for your assignment. The axis of symmetry is the first number or the x value of your vertex. So x is equal to negative 2, and the axis of symmetry is a line, so it's always going to be x is equal to something. And then the next thing that we're going to talk about is option 2, which is just solving. And the way we solve for h in that equation, because remember, we want the h value and the k value. The h value, the easiest way to do this is going negative b over 2a. And so I go back to standard form, my standard form, which is here, and my b value is 4. So I'm going to go, maybe I better write that down so you guys know where I'm getting this from. Or not, because it won't erase. Okay, just pretend. I'll just put it right here. So our equation is y is equal to 1x squared plus 4x minus 5. So this is our standard form, which means this is A, this is B, this is C. So when I say that we're doing negative B, it was a positive 4, so we're going to put in negative 4. And then it's 2 times A, which is 1. So this is negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. Notice how that's what we already have for our H value. Because remember, this is H and this is K. And then the way we solve for K is we're going to take the H value and we plug it in everywhere there's an X in our equation. So our equation is 1 times negative 2 squared plus 4 times negative 2 minus 5. And we're just going to plug that into our calculator. And so here's our calculator. So if I plug that in, we've got 1 times negative 2 squared. Notice that it's in parentheses, plus 4 times negative 2 in parentheses minus 5. And that's going to give me negative 9, which is exactly what I had here. So this is option 2. And option 2, again, I like the best. I think it's the easiest. Oh, somehow it changed colors. Change colors all the way through. Option 2, I think, is the easiest. So this is what I would recommend doing, just because I think it's easier. And then what we're going to do, 5th period, you didn't have to graph, but 7th and 8th, you do need to graph. So if you are in 5th, then just skip to the next video. If you are in 7th and 8th, then make sure you watch. So what we're going to do is we're going to graph these pieces. And so we're going to graph negative 2, negative 9, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we're going to graph all of our points. And so our very first point we're going to graph is, I'm going to do the vertex. I think that's the easiest one to graph. And so we're going to go negative 2, negative 9. That's off a little bit. Okay, and then our axis of symmetry is that x equals negative 2. So that's just going to be a vertical line that goes through this. That's why my vertex is off a little bit. Okay, and then we're going to graph, so that was this part. We graphed that first. We're going to graph our x-intercepts at negative 5, 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at 1, 0. Notice that that's 1, 2, 3 spaces away from the axis of symmetry, and our other is 1, 2, 3 spaces from the axis of symmetry. And then the last thing we're going to graph is 0, negative 5, which is on our x-axis. Notice that that is 2 spaces away from that axis of symmetry. So we're going to go on the other side of the axis of symmetry, 2 spaces away. And then we've got our curve. And we connect it with a curved line. And so then that's how we graph our parabola, or parabola, if you say it that way. All right, so we are going to stop for this video, and then the back side of the notes we will do for video 2.